Hello everyone, we're here with a special guest, Rhys. It's going to talk about something that is really interesting for us in the industry and how we can relate on this big topic that it is a little bit difficult for us to think about it. So how are you, Rhys?
I'm good, I'm great.
Rhys, I would like to ask you about what do you think about the industry here in Colombia? How do you see it in the world?
Yeah, well, this is the first time that I've been to Colombia, and I've visited Bogota and Barranquilla, and they're both really great cities, and the people are very passionate. And I think overall the industry is still fairly new, I think relatively, but there are some good studios out there, and that's a great thing. There seems to be pretty good government support, and that's really important when you're trying to start the industry. But I think what the country needs is, more and more young people to actually want to go into making video games and train to make video games and get experience, as engineers and artists and designers and business people and lawyers. Like, we need everything. We need live streamers, right? Yay, otters, we need otters.
Clearly
Yeah,
we do.
so
I would like to ask you about those type of questions that we don't ask ourselves when we have our enterprise.
Yeah.
And the first of all, it's how my company is worth of.
how much is my company worth?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the question of how much is my company worth is a very difficult sort of question, especially when you have a small business. Valuation or the worth of a company is all over the place. It has many values simultaneously, right? So you have, for example, if you have a small business, you have what we call the book value, which is the value of all of your assets minus all of the debts that you have, right? So that's book value. That's a very low valuation. Then you have tax valuation, and whatever your government says you're worth, then you have to pay taxes on. That's that. There's a valuation when you want to buy one of your co-founders out. That's a kind of fair market valuation, FMV. So that's a valuation. There's the valuation of what you think your future potential is and how much money earnings you're going to make. And that's a completely different valuation. And then there's the value of you as a company to a larger company that may want to buy you. That's a bigger valuation, probably.
Okay.
So simultaneously, a small company has so many different forms of valuation,
Okay.
right? It's almost not worth asking. Usually when people say, what am I worth? They mean, what could someone from the outside buy me for? And the answer to that is usually, are you making money? If you make money, that is, if you have revenue coming in from selling a game, and then you pay all the people and all the expenses that you have, and then you have the earnings left over, the profit, if you add the profit up for, the next 3 to 5, 6 or 7 years, right? That's the potential, that's the valuation that you probably will get to. Now, there's no science to that. But if you're going to approximate what you think your value is, that's the way that you would approach it,
Okay.
right? In the case of Colombian entities, I'd say, it's like the value of any company anywhere in the world. So if there's a company out there with a hit game, right, and they're Colombian, they're probably making a lot of revenue. They probably have tremendous value.
Okay.
If you put out games and for other people and you have a little bit of margin coming in, you're probably not worth that much yet, right? But the whole future of Colombia or any place that's trying to make games is we hope for 1 or 2 studios to really have a big success, right? Because that lets other people know that it can happen, right? And people want to try to build new companies, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Remember that here in Colombia we've got Unity offices here
Sure.
in Pereira.
Great.
And well, Jam City acquired last year a big company here that is Brains. So
Brains,
now
sure,
we
I
have-
know Alejandro and those guys, sure.
We have now those type of enterprise here.
Yeah, and I've known Brains for 3 or 4 years.
Oh. So
Yeah.
this is your first time here, but you know a little bit. more.
So there were a few Colombian developers and a few game-related companies that would come to Game Developers Conference in San Francisco or to Gamescom in Cologne, Germany, and those are both shows that I go to every year. And so I've known them, and I've known them socially, and I have clients who have actually hired Colombian developers, so I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
How can you make your company worth even more?
Yeah. So that's just one of the things I spoke about at the conference. But you know, the thing about game companies is they're not like other companies, right? The main value is going to be about what sort of revenue comes in, but the secondary stuff that's important is, you know, what intellectual property do you own? So the name of the game, if you're a game developer, you'll probably start out life working for other game developers, working for other publishers as an outsourcing house of some type. That's very common, right? But you can't stay in that business. That business is not a good business, right? Because you'll make, let's say you have a project, it's a $500,000 project, right? $500,000. You might make, you know, $15,000 off of that project, right, as your margin. So that's your profit. But that's not going to be a big business for you, right? So what you really need to do is, that's just a first step. The next step is to try to create a game yourself, right? Have an idea for a game, pitch it, make that game with a publisher, and try to keep the IP. Try to own the game. Often when you're making your first game, it's very difficult to own the IP because all the money is being provided by the publisher, so they want to own it, right?
Yeah.
But you should still try to fight and see if you can get it. Sometimes you can. There are some publishers that are very generous. They don't actually care. But whenever you can, keep your IP. And whenever you can, if you make a game, it's better to have IP than not have IP. It's also better to have a franchise than just IP. You know what I mean by a franchise?
Yeah,
So
we would like to explain a little bit more about it.
So, in other words, like if I make one game using some sort of intellectual property, right? And then I make another game using the same intellectual property, right? So now I have a sequel. And now I make a different, so maybe that was an endless runner or that was a match 3, but now I decide to do a word game using the same IP. That's a franchise.
Yeah,
And a franchise is almost always more valuable than just one IP,
of course. So
right?
keep your IP.
Keep your IP, develop your IP, you know, don't always make different IP. That's okay, but it's better to try to see potential in stuff and develop an IP and create a following, right? So that's another thing. And then on top of that, I think, is always just making your teams better. You know, learning from every mistake that you make, every game that you launch, figuring out if you have an access to new talent, people that have experience that are better than the people you currently have. Sometimes you have to make the difficult decision to upgrade your team.
Okay.
Because you got to keep upgrading the team to make better and better product.
Upgrade the team is to educate the team or have a
Sure.
new team here.
Well, that's really interesting, right? Because when you're working and you have employees, you can either work them 100%, right? Or you can train them 100%, or you can be somewhere in the middle, right? Training builds future capacity.
Yeah.
But if you really have to work, you have no time to train, and people don't become any better. So the real trick is, you know, in this kind of 2x2, can you divide the time between performing and teaching people to be better, right? Right. So if you can do that, if you can actually make some of your employees train and be better employees at what they do, that's great. That's really, but it can be expensive, but it's better than having to fire people and hire new people.
Yeah.
If you can do it. But sometimes, let's face it, there's talent on the market. People are who are a good fit for your team, and it's better to just buy that talent you know. But you should always, as a game developer, be trying to make your games better.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And that means making your team better.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So, so that's one way. The other is just be very serious about your business if you're a game developer, right? Be very formal about it. You know, always use a game attorney to make your deals. Don't try to make deals by yourself, like without an attorney. That would be silly, right? It's worth the money, every penny. And also, the important thing is to network a lot. Always network inside the industry, not just in Colombia, but also like get out to places like the Game Developers Conference or Gamescom in Cologne or Tokyo Game Show and meet a lot of people from outside the world, right?
Or the Atlantico Video Game Summit.
There you go. That's one. So, but try to go to not just your regional and country or national shows, but try to go to an international show. It'll help you because those connections are really valuable. And you know, and if you network wisely, you probably will come back with something that's valuable for your company.
Make it a big change for your job, for your view also.
Well, you know, you only need one deal at a time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all you need is one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for this interview, Rhys. It's really nice to have you here. Keep in touch with Grande, Jugando and this initiative with the Bogota Post. Bye.
Bye, Kawa.